Well, hi, this is John Sarver with Great Lakes Renewable Energy Association. And it's a pleasure tonight to have Julie Baldwin from the Michigan Public Service Commission join us. And she's going to kind of give us an update on what's going on at the MPSC. I just have a few announcements to make. One of them is I'd like to thank our sponsors, the Michigan Department of Environment, Great Lakes and Energy, McNaughton McKay, and Carbon Solar Energy. I should mention that, please mute yourself until later so we won't have any interference. But the next Thursday, we're going to have a Detroit solar story. And then the 2 weeks after, which is the Thursday before Christmas and the Thursday before New Year's Eve, we'll be taking a break. So then we'll please mute yourself, whoever. Okay, thank you. I can't neglect to do a commercial because, probably a lot of you, maybe all of you are GLREA members, but if you're not for some reason, would like to encourage you to join GLREA and help support our advocacy and education efforts. And we just celebrated our 30th, we're celebrating our 30th anniversary. So GLREA has been at this for quite a while now as both an advocacy and education organization. With that, I think I'm going to pass it on to you, Julie.
All right, thanks, John. Can you hear me? Well, okay, great, thank you. I want to make sure that everyone can hear. I'm going to share my screen so people can see the slides. I've got about 10, 11 slides, so it shouldn't take that long to go through. First of all, I'd like to thank John and GLREA for inviting me to come in and speak. I've always loved every speaking experience I've had when I've come to a GLREA meeting. I appreciate how engaged everybody is and the interesting questions, and it's good to know what you guys are thinking about. I'd like to give you a little overview of some of the distributed generation related activities that are going on at the Commission these days. I'm going to talk about the most recent data from the Michigan Distributed Generation Program and the recently concluded Distributed Energy Resources Rate Design Work Group. And then I've got some distributed generation cost shift analysis data that I'm going to show you. I realize the numbers might be hard to see, but this is data that was included in our October 2021 annual DG report, and it's based on data that the utilities give us in March, at the end of March every year. This is for year end 2020, and you can see that the number of participants in the DG program finally went over 10,000 customers in Michigan. I was really excited to see that we at least hit that milestone. And we had kind of a big jump from 2019 to 2020. So I'm assuming that everybody has a general understanding of the distributed generation program. It's the new program that replaced on the net metering program. And it's for customers who install behind the meter renewable generation projects. And this chart can give you a sense of the size of the distributed generation program. So we are at about 90 megawatts with program size. And if you just add up the nameplate capacity, or not, it's not exactly nameplate, but the AC capacity of all the generators participating, we are at 90 megawatts. And that's the green line. And the yellow line shows that most of the projects participating in the distributed generation program are in what we call category 1, which are projects that are 20 kW and smaller, and generally mostly residential customers. And we are seeing a lot of customers in the DG program opting to spend the extra money and install batteries. And you can see that DTE has the most customers with batteries. They've got 615 customers with batteries installed with their solar. And that is because most likely because they were the first utility to implement the distributed generation tariff, which was a replacement for the net metering program that's a little less economically favorable. So it makes more sense for customers to consider installing a battery and being able to use more of their solar generation behind the meter. And I'm excited to see what the data looks like next year, because we're hearing from many solar installers who are telling us that at least 50% of their projects are including batteries. And this slide has a lot of numbers on it, and I apologize. I'll try to just hit the highlights here. The way the law is set up for the distributed generation program, their utilities are required to offer the program until the program reaches 1% of their peak load. And it's further broken down. The 1% is further broken down so that 0.5% is allocated to the smaller projects, 20 kilowatt and under. And that is the part of the DG program that fills up first. And so we track this for the utilities, and you can see that for consumers at the end of 2020, they had 57% of the space remaining in their program. And I neglected to mention that consumers doubled the size of their DG program. So that means that the total size is 2% of their peak load, but the 20 kilowatt and under part of the program is 1% of peak load. So they doubled it, and it had 57% space remaining at the end of 2020, but we got an update at the end of August, and now at the end of August, it had 40% space remaining. It's filling up. And the same with DTE. They have not doubled their program, so their 20 kilowatt and under size of the DG program is capped at 0.5% of peak load, which is 55 megawatts. And as of July 2021, they had 35% space remaining. And I wanted to give you an update on the progress that each utility is making toward replacing their net metering program with this new distributed generation tariff. And everybody, all the utilities will have done it except for UMERC, which is a utility in the Upper Peninsula. And we're working on a settlement agreement in the Alpena case, and so I expect the order to come out on that within a few months. And then Northern States Power, that order, I don't know when that order is going to come out, but they filed a tariff, and the tariffs are all incredibly similar. Now, moving on to the My Power Grid, which is it's an initiative started by the commission in, I think it was 2019, that is looking at creating work groups and trying to understand how to facilitate the most effective transition to clean energy for Michigan using the electric grid. And one of the work groups was created in response to Senate Resolution 142 of 2020. And the Senate resolution was concerned with whether there should be a separate grid charge for distributed generation customers, and looking at how distributed generation customers are changing the way the grid is used. And the commission hired the Regulatory Assistance Project to conduct this study and prepare the report. And the final report was issued last month. And the report focused on, it didn't make any recommendations for what the legislature or the commission might do. It just provided a lot of options and different ways to achieve different rate design goals. So in order to put together a more Michigan specific analysis using Michigan utility data, some commission staffers, and I was not involved, they did an in-depth rate analysis. And I'm going to be talking about those slides, the next few slides. And I have copied out a few slides that our Chief of Staff, Mike Byrne, used when he testified on November 2nd in front of the Senate Energy and Technology Committee. And I can provide these slides to John, and there is a link in here to the full slide deck that Mike presented. But I'd like to just show you the highlights. So this is kind of laying out what commission staff did to contextualize the big rate design study that RAP did to make it Michigan specific. So our rates people looked at data from DTE's rate case from several years ago. And then they also looked at data from Consumers Energy's rate case, a recent rate case. And the study that they did only focused on category 1 generators, which are 20 kilowatts and under, participating in the distributed generation program, and residential customers. So they only looked at residential tariffs. And this study that staff did looked at what the potential cost shift could be if 0.5% of program capacity became full, 1%, 5%, and up to 10% of the utility's peak load became full with distributed generation. And it gets a little confusing because we only analyzed the category 1 part of the distributed generation program. So here where we talk about the category 1 program being 1%, that 1% is spread over 0.5% goes to category 1, and then 0.25% goes to slightly larger DG projects, and then category 3 is for methane digesters. So we really only focus on category 1, which would be the residential size. So that explains kind of what the data was that was used. And I wanted to go back and say the cost shift, it's a new term that we've been focusing on in this DER rate design study. And we're looking at it in a neutral way. We're not saying the cost shift is good or bad or anything needs to be done. We just wanted to know what the difference was in how much DG customers would have paid toward the utilities distribution system if they did not have their DG project. So we want to know how much less a DG customers are paying toward the distribution system because they have a DG project. That is what we are referring to as the cost shift. And then here's all the disclaimers that we use to just talk about this analysis. Okay, these are the actual results. And it's going to take a little bit of explaining, but this is for DTE, and they have their program. They have a cap of 0.5% of peak load for their category 1 customers, and that's what we're looking at here. And so the rates people calculated, if this program became full, and they analyzed how much less these customers would be paying toward the utilities revenue requirement for distribution. And at 0.5%, DG customers are paying $1.5 million less. And that is out of $1.86 billion of distribution system revenue that's collected every year to fund the distribution system. And then the rates people calculated, well, if we spread this cost shift over the non-participating customers, how much more would they have to pay in a year? And it turned out to be 77 cents per year more. And then the calculation was made for different program sizes, all the way up to 10% penetration. And at 10% penetration, DG customers would be paying about $30 million per year less than they would have if they did not have their DG projects. And that works out to, if that cost shift of $30 million is spread over all the customers, and DTE has 2 million residential customers, it is $16.76 per year. And to further put the 77 cents per year cost shift and the $16 per year cost shift into perspective, the rates people looked at, well, what's the size of the cost shift if we looked at all the customers who are buying less energy because they've implemented energy waste reduction measures? They've made their homes more efficient. They're buying less from the utility. What kind of cost shift is that creating? And that is about 31 million annually, which is about the same as we would see if DTE's DG program was at 10%.
You by yourself?
Oh, God.
Everything okay?
Lee, go on mute, Lee.
And then to further put this into context, if a residential customer bought a more efficient air conditioner, that results in a $54 cost shift. So these cost shifts, they're happening all the time for various reasons when customers change their usage within the residential customer class. And the point of this analysis was to show how distributed generation, how that cost shift fits in with all the other cost shifts that happen. And then we have the same data for consumers' energy. And since they have doubled the size of their DG program, we started at 1%. And the cost shift, if the 1% category 1 program became full, there would be DG customers would be paying $1.5 million less towards the utilities revenue requirement for distribution. And that spreading that cost shift over all the customers would be 96 cents per year. And then the same kind of thing, if 10% became full, $15 million cost shift. And that results in a $10 annual impact. And already, because of energy waste reduction measures, there's a cost shift of $24 million compared to the $15 million if consumers' DG program hit 10%. And then the same thing with the air conditioner. That's a $49 cost shift. So this hopefully provides some perspective of the kind of cost shift and change in revenue that the utility is seeing from DG program customers. And that's all I had in my presentation.
Julie, this is John Freeman. I'm going to
Yes.
ask the first question.
Okay.
And I really appreciate you sharing this data, and you did it in a way that I think is very clear. So the bottom line for DTE is that the cost shift for a non-solar user is 77 cents per year.
Yep.
So why does DTE and consumers, why are they still telling legislators and saying in op-eds that there is still massive cost shifting going on by non-solar owners to solar owners, when clearly the data you're presenting shows that to be false? Why are they still perpetrating, I'll be polite, this false information?
Well, Mike Byrne, our chief of staff, he presented this information to the Senate Energy and Technology Committee. And I watched the testimony, and if any of you who haven't seen the testimony, if you have time, it's available on the Senate Committee's website. It's real interesting. They asked a lot of questions, and I think they were very interested in getting this information. And that's one thing. And then I'd also like to add that the utilities, they have not had a chance to publicly say what they think about this analysis. This is a staff analysis, and I'm sure that they will have plenty to say about the way the analysis was done.
Hey, Julie, before I start calling on people to ask questions, I just want to clarify too, I thought the analysis was helpful because, for one thing, it did emphasize that, 77 cents on an annual bill is not anything people are going to notice. That's for sure, considering all the things that are happening. but also, you know, the whole, whatever, whether it's waste reduction or solar or electric vehicle charging, none of those numbers really take into account the benefits that come from either doing waste reduction or doing solar distributed generation, right? So it's not a total picture, right? It's just kind of a slice because that's kind of what some legislators focus on.
Exactly. And this was done by an economist at the commission who's interested in facts, things that are you can calculate and you know they're right, black and white. And this analysis is that kind of information.
You know, maybe you can kind of, you know, I found the EV cost shifting interesting because, you know, if got an EV coming in June, you know, and so I plug it in, right, and I pay more. Okay, so you know, short term, really, that doesn't benefit any of the other customers, right?
No, not until we have another rate case, and then we analyze the increased usage from all the EVs, and then we can spread the cost of the distribution system over more kilowatt hours.
Well, and that's true also for the solar situation, right? Is that, you know, I put the solar system, or you put the solar system on your roof. It doesn't have an immediate impact on my neighbor, right? It has to, down the road, when they redo the rates, then it becomes an impact.
Yep.
Yeah, because I think what happens is, you know, you start looking at cost shifting. Somebody out there is thinking, oh, my bill just went up 77 cents because of John Farber. You know, and of course, that's not the reality, right?
Yep. And like, there are so many reasons for a cost shift. Like,
right.
Like my bill went up because I've got 3 more adults living in my home right now, which I love.
Oh God.
You know, it's
there goes the bill.
Yeah. So our bill is really high. And then when they move out, then our bill will probably be half what it is now. And that's a cost shift because I'm using less than I was before. And that's just
the way it is. That's how the system works, right? Yeah.
Yep.
Now, you know, we got some questions coming up here, and I must, you know, I can't see everybody because we've got 40 participants. So please, if you do have a question, just go to reactions and raise your hand. And I'll just, as they come up there, I'll just kind of call folks. So Charles, you get the first question.
Yeah. Hi, Julie.
Hi.
Given the fact that there's this, you know, so the shift that you say is going on, and it's going to continue no matter what DT or consumers does. Given the fact too that there's going to be, you know, especially the legislative Build Back Better, whatever, there's going to be some climate legislation to be of getting off fossil fuel altogether. How much does that factor in when let's say DT comes on? We need to build this new, you know, more efficient, but this new power plant in terms of looking not just today's needs, but projecting out, you know, 10, 15, 20 years in the future.
Well, I mean, I don't know the answer to that, but I think that, well, DTE they'll be bringing their 1100 megawatt combined cycle blue water energy center gas plant online in June. I think it's June or July. And that's going to be, they will be very well set with capacity and load following capacity with the plant. And they will continue to add renewables. That the integrated resource plan that they filed, you know, included a lot of solar and some wind. So I don't expect, you know, another gas plant from DTE unless, and I don't know, I mean, they still got Bell River and they still have Monroe coal plant. So I don't know what their needs are going to be to add I don't know if they're going to be trying to add more gas plants.
Thank you, Julie. Stefan. Stefan Green.
Sorry. Yes.
Hi.
I wanted to know, seems like the rate
Case is kind of missing the point at this,
with the current setup of,
how we're trying to shift to renewables.
and it seems like we almost need to ask them
SDTE in particular, but consumers as well, to
go back and rejigger these figures, because it doesn't
appear like they're really
working for society.
here like they've been asked to.
They're providing power.
But if it's not provided the way they like it, then they're going to oppose it.
So is there a way we could ask them
To
rejigger to
redo their rate case early, or to come up with an alternative way to pay for this stuff.
So
You know-
DTE will be filing in a new integrated resource plan next year in 2022. And that's when we'll look, that's when the commission and 30 other parties who intervene, will look at the modeling that the company did and try to figure out what the best preferred course of action is for the utility until they file their next integrated resource plan case.
Yeah, so
Did
is there
that
a
answer
way we
your
could-
question?
Yeah, I think so.
Well, I'm so furious at DTE right now, I can't even speak. But so it seems almost
Almost like we ought to
that they're not providing the service that we asked them for. And we almost ought to split them up and say, here, you guys do the distribution and you guys do the power generation. And now we'll figure out what your real costs are, instead of trying to mix it all up, because I feel
feel like I'm listening to a carnival about
they're trying to sell me stuff and
they're not out
for my good.
doesn't seem like they're
They're working for the
good of society.
Well, there's a
Sorry,
lot
sorry
of
for the wrong.
issues. Like, for
Yeah.
example, we were just talking about Bell River coal plant and Monroe coal plant today, and there's a lot, like billions of unrecovered costs with those plants. So if they get closed down early, then we still have to pay the cost for those plants. And so it's such a balancing act.
So, but we believe
That they need to build these new plants because they tell us to, and they're lying to us in so many other ways that why should we believe anything they tell us?
we're going to have a lot of stuff.
Stranded assets.
I would
The fact that most of their generation capacity is going to be stranded,
that's their choice.
except for it becomes my choice because I have to pay the rate for it.
Even though
Made the mistake.
that's what's infuriating.
Infuriating about it because they stick their head in the sand and they want to do business the old way, and they don't want to go to they don't want to listen to some novel way of doing business because it's
Hard. They don't want to think. I'm sorry.
I shouldn't let myself rant like this in a public forum, but I find them very disturbing.
And thank you, Stefan. Dave, you're up next.
Okay, I have maybe a little different question. I live in Livingston County, just across the border out of Washtenaw. And I received a local newspaper that says the local community here has a moratorium on power generation for commercial use. So this is not residential,
Okay.
but it doesn't expire until 2023. And I wondered, how do they just institute something like that without, some kind of MPSC relationship, let's say?
So I can tell you that in 2008, when the renewable portfolio standard was being negotiated in the legislature, there was a provision that was discussed that had the Public Service Commission handling siting for, at least for wind farms at that time. And there, after a lot of discussion and input, that the legislature decided that they did not want the commission to be involved in any way in the siting of renewable projects. And that was all, it remains all handled at the local government level. So the commission doesn't have any authority or input into what local governments do.
I see. And this is more wind farm related, but they threw in solar, so it's all grouped together. Which, I mean, that judging by 2023, it says it's allowed 18 months. So I would guess they put that in October, but first I've heard about it. And had I known that was coming up, I would have gone to one of their meetings and said, hey, why are you doing this? All right, thank you for the answer.
Okay, you're welcome.
Dale, you're up.
Thanks, Julie, for talking with everybody and presenting the study that the MPSC did. I think I have to really object to the term cost shift being used, because the Public Service Commission study is supposed to be, even-handed, right? It's not supposed to favor one side or the other. And just using the term cost shift, naming it that, falls straight into the lap of anybody who wants to say that the utilities are suffering, or like other customers are suffering from solar. The facts are that it's a lost revenue. There's lost revenue from generation, because the utility, if they're generating it, they don't have to generate that power if I make it locally. And then maybe there's lost revenue for transmission distribution, but I would argue that no, because anything that I outflow now with DG, I don't get credit for the outflow delivery cost, and it goes to my neighbors. It goes to a shorter distance on their distribution network and uses less of the distribution network, and they still get the full revenue from my neighbors. So I would argue they're not losing anything there. But let's please, can somebody discuss the terminology that's used, because it's really lost revenue for the utility from distribution and for power supply. Those are the two things that they're losing. And we say that it's being, that loss for the utility is being shifted to other customers, but I don't think customers have a duty to buy power from the utilities. We don't owe DTE any sort of specific amount of revenue. Only if we use power, yeah, we should pay for it. So I don't know. How did that term cost shift get set? Because that is from everything that DTE or consumers or Joe Bellino say. And I really, that's not fair really to use those words, I think.
Oh, it's a rate making term. That's why it's used. And I also want to point out that the cost shift numbers that were on the slides, that was just distribution. Power supply was not included at all. That was not factored in.
That study is then for loss of distribution, because if a DG customer generates some portion of their power, they are not paying distribution for that power because they just got it from their solar panels. So that's lost revenue, lost distribution system revenue for the utility.
Yeah, I think you could think about it that way. And just like when my three roommates move out, there'll be lost revenue because they won't be living in my house using electricity. So definitely, but the rate making term is definitely cost shift. But I wanted to say something about the fact that, like, if your neighbor uses a kilowatt hour that you generate and it goes through your transformer up on the distribution just to the next door neighbor, the utility still gets full distribution for that, because we have like postage stamp distribution. Like, we don't charge people who live way at the end of the distribution line more money for distribution. Everyone pays the same. All the residential customers pay the same for distribution, no matter where they live or how far from the power plant they are.
Per kilowatt hour.
Right, per kilowatt hour, yes.
So why is my argument, you're sounding like you don't agree with the utility still gets revenue from my excess generation. They still get that distribution revenue because my neighbor is paying for, the power that they're buying.
And they should, because the way we calculate the rates is, we take the revenue requirement for the distribution system and divide it by the number of kilowatt hours that are sold. And the utility did sell that kilowatt hour to your neighbors. So that's why they have to pay.
Hey, Julie, too, now I listened to Mike Bird when he testified to the Senate Energy Committee, and tell me if I remember correctly, because I seem to remember that it was an interesting discussion that he was basically started out by saying, even if you look at this the way DTE does, and he wasn't saying that's necessarily the right way to look at it. The shift is like 77 cents a year annual cost. And so he was trying to make the point that, there's all these cost shifting and stuff talk, and that, you look at the numbers, it's like, not a lot of money. And then at some point, he maybe reluctantly, but he did kind of say, hey, with the new distributed generation tariff, basically there is no cost shifting. He basically admitted that, by definition, the distributed generation tariff was fair. And that's how it had been designed. So he was kind of, did I listen to him correctly? Does that sound right?
I don't remember his exact words, but I know that there is a belief on the staff, and I think even the chairman has testified that the DG tariff is correct, and it's not creating cost recovery issues.
Right. I seem to remember the chairman talked about no subsidies, or basically that was the bottom line. There aren't any subsidies anymore with the new DG tariff. So but legislators still have these questions like, oh, what's the cost shift? But anyway, Harvey, you're up next. Oh, Dale, go ahead, follow-up question.
Can you define cost recovery versus the cost shift that I don't like? What's cost recovery?
So in a rate case, there's a revenue requirement that the utility has to get in order to pay for everything they do. And as we put rates in place, so that they can recover the cost for all of their expenses that have been approved.
How was that, Dale? Okay. Okay.
He doesn't like it, but
Harvey, do you have a question? Go ahead.
I'm new to this game and I don't understand 80% of what I'm hearing.
okay.
Because I need it to be dumbed down. I don't know what a DG is. I asked the question in the chat and somebody told me that it has something to do with the difference between the credit I get for generating from my panels and what I pay. But in reality, I think I pay exactly what I get. In other words, the credit for me is equal to the cost of electricity. So the fact that somebody answered that question for me with that answer makes me feel even more confused. So can you just break it down like I'm a newbie and tell me what distributed generation is, please?
Okay. When did you install your solar project?
Right before the April decision was made with the new, in 2019, with the
Okay.
new, you can't have as much anymore.
Okay.
I got grandfathered into, I applied during the week that they were going to make that decision.
That's terrific. So yeah, you are in the net metering program, which is basically a kilowatt hour that the utility delivers to you, has the same value as a kilowatt hour that you generate and put out on the grid. So
Okay,
that's net metering.
okay, but I think I knew that before attending tonight. I don't know what DG is.
DG is the program that the legislature put in place to replace net metering in the 2016 energy law.
So basically, distributed generation is somehow how the people that make energy with their own solar panels get shortchanged when they take energy from DTE.
Well, the way I look at it is under the distributed generation program, the customer pays full retail rate for every kilowatt hour delivered to them by the utility. And they can use all the solar they generate, as much of it as they can behind the meter, and they're offsetting a full retail rate purchase. But anything they can't use on site that gets sent to the grid, for DTE, they get like a 7.5 cent credit instead of a 15 or 16, or I don't know what the full retail rate is right now. So that's the difference. The outflow credit for net metering is the full retail rate, which is like 15 cents per kilowatt hour. And under the DG program, it's 7.5 cents.
Okay, so what I said is accurate. If I am in the DG world and I supply Detroit Edison with extra energy, and then in the winter I'm not making so much, so I need to buy it from them, I don't get it for the rate that I would pay. I have to pay extra.
You pay the full retail rate for what they deliver, yes.
Right, I don't get credited equivalent to what I gave them. If I gave them 20 kilowatt hours, they're going to give me back 12 or whatever.
If you're thinking about it from a financial arrangement, I've never thought about it that way. I just think about the rate that you pay, but yes.
Okay, so my keenest interest, I'm probably going to sell my house in the next 2 years, and I would like to put solar panels on my next house. And it looks a whole lot to me like DTE and consumers and all these other companies have absolutely no interest in supporting solar. And if I ask them, because I need to ask their permission to put that solar on that next house, they may just say no in a couple of years because it's all full up. They won't allow it anymore. How is the state and your commission in particular moving that line?
There are other tariff options for customers who install on-site generation.
Okay, you just used the word tariff, and I was going to ask you, because I have no idea what that other thing is that has the word tariff on it. So
So
talk,
pardon me, I've been doing this for 33 years and
yeah, no, I get it.
I-
I get
I
it. You do this
just
every
don't-
day. I do this once a year, you know?
yeah,
I'm here to get
So-
educated.
there's different rates. Like we have the net metering rate, we have the distributed generation rate schedule, and then DTE in particular, they have what they call Rider 14, which pays about, I don't know, 3.5 cents per kilowatt hour for everything that goes on the grid. And a project does not have to be renewable to be able to be on that rate schedule. So there's that option. And then there's
I don't know what
another.
that means. So can you give me an example of what you just talked about? Because I have no idea what you're talking about.
So like we had, there was a customer who wanted to do I can't remember the name of it. I think a cogeneration, a small, a micro cogeneration project with his furnace. And since that was powered by natural gas and not renewables, when this customer applied to interconnect with DTE, they were told you cannot be on the net metering rate. You cannot be, oh, thank you, combined heat and power. And then you can't be on distributed generation because the legislature requires you to be renewable. But we do have this other rate that's named Rider 14. It's an old rate, and the customer pays normal rates for everything the utility delivers, and then they get 3.5 cents for everything they export to the grid. So there are other options if the DG program fills up, but I know that there's a lot of activity going on at the legislature. Well, probably not right now because they're going to be done in next week, but there's activity trying to get something else.
We're going to have to move on. We have a number of other questions here. Nicolette, go ahead.
Well, Harvey was asking one of the questions I had, but I was also curious about who's going to be expanding the infrastructure to handle all the additional electrical appliances and et cetera, electric cars, heat pumps. So when is that all going to be taken into consideration and the infrastructure being built to handle that? And when it is built, will we be able to put as much on our house as we can use? Like right now, consumers said I could only have 90% of my total. And so I couldn't have 100% when I installed it. And they gave me a maximum that I could put on my roof based on that. And also, if they start charging for the infrastructure and the transmission lines, my concern is my EV, I have to pay $200 extra in taxes, sort of to make up for the gasoline taxes I don't use. But I don't drive. My regular car, my gas guzzler, gets 40 miles to the gallon. I don't drive 40,000 miles to make up that $200. So I'm subsidizing people by having to pay that much more in taxes. So how do we know that we're going to get a fair deal if they start charging for the transmission lines? So that was like a multiple question about the charges and also what's going to be happening with our infrastructure to handle, because by my estimate, we're going to be putting at least another 100%, maybe even 200% electricity on our lines if we go the way we're supposed to be going.
Well, Nicolette, I can tell you that it is a topic that is front and center at the commission. Every 3 years, utilities file integrated resource plan cases. And in those cases, they have to forecast the amount of EVs that they expect to have. and they have to plan for the load for that. So that's kind of the load part. And then utilities are having annual rate cases, and the biggest driver in rate increases is beefing up the distribution system. And I know in the current rate case, Consumers is asking for special IT equipment so they can manage the distribution system with distributed generation more efficiently. The fact that we have advanced smart meters, that allows us to do a whole lot more and be more efficient using the system. But we'll be paying a lot more every rate case, so the utility can prepare the system so we have the system up tomorrow.
Let's move on to John.
Julie, thank you for spending time with us here and taking all these questions. I mean, this is not in your job description. So my first question, you sort of half answered. I have two, which is, what happens when one of these utilities hits their cap on DG, right? DG made a statement that there is no cap on the number of rooftop solar installations, and our company remains committed to interconnecting any customer to the electric grid, regardless of arbitrary threshold for subsidies in current state statute. So yeah, I'm kind of curious, well, then if you're not on the DG tariff, I mean, you could interconnect and have a solar system, but configure your inverter for no export, right? That's obviously still an option, and some people do that anyway. But if you want to have an export option, I mean, do you have to qualify as a qualified facility under PURPA and go through PURPA paperwork? Because I think that would be a little onerous. I'm kind of looking for, what are the options? I wasn't familiar with Rider 14, and I missed which utility that was.
That was DTE.
Okay.
And unfortunately, it's called distributed generation. So it can be quite confusing. So Consumers they have their self-generation, I think it's called self-generation tariff. And that one would be open for DG customers. And I know that Rick Blumenstock on rebuttal in the current Consumers rate case, he said that they will continue to interconnect customers, and they have other rates. It's just that I know that the other rates are not, the outflow credit is not like the DG program outflow credit.
Okay. And then my other question, going back to the study on the so-called cost shifting, did the study give any consideration to the reduction in costs of maintaining and upgrading the distribution system because peak demand has been reduced by the DG customers? It seemed to me like it was kind of a one-armed accountant that only looked at lost revenue, but it didn't look at lost costs, money they don't have to spend. The utilities seem to claim that, well, the distribution system costs are fixed, when they clearly aren't, because they're spending fortunes and raising rates upgrading it. So it's not a fixed cost. That's just not true. Sorry, I'm proselytizing. Please, I'll let you answer.
So I know that's a really good question. And this study was intended to just look at one thing. And it was, how much are DG customers no longer paying for distribution? And I think the study did a really good job putting that cost shift into perspective with other cost shifts that are perfectly acceptable.
It did. And the way I like to put it, Julie, is we've spent more money arguing about the DG rates than any conceivable subsidy or a cost shift that might be occurring.
Yes.
It's a gnat in the room, and we're fighting a civil war over it. So it's pretty silly, and it just reveals that there's a alternative agenda, right? A hidden agenda that the utilities have that they're just not saying, because it wouldn't be worth this fight if that's what it was really about.
I think you're right, John. It's not strictly about money, that's for sure. Yeah. David Herb?
Hi, Julie. Thanks
Oh,
for the
hi.
presentation. A lot of good information, very informative. I have a broader question. I
Okay.
apologize if you presented it in the beginning, but the utilities have made net zero carbon emission pledges, and I'm just curious how they're predicting residential solar becoming percentage of total generation as they approach those goals. Do they see residential solar being part of the solution or not so much?
David, that's a really good point to bring up. And I think the commission is getting more interested in having better forecasting of rooftop solar by utilities in integrated resource plan cases. And I think the commission is interested in the kind of contribution that it could make. Like right now with the kind of program we have, we've already got 90 megawatts of generation in the program.
Patrick.
All right, thank you, Julie. I think John Richter asked a good part of my question already, but let me go at this again. As far as the cost shifting and the investment in upgrading the infrastructure for electric vehicles, the thought that kept running through my mind was that the utilities ought to be doing everything they can to reduce the amount of investment that they need to put into increasing the infrastructure. I mean, upgrading the infrastructure. And distributed generation certainly reduces the need for the upgrade, because as other people have said, your power ends up going to your neighbors. It doesn't have to go across those big distribution lines when you're selling power back to the grid, which is part of the problem with the term cost shift that we've talked about here, right? That actually they're not using the whole grid, right? A lot of times they're only using that local part of it. And I'll go even further though, and I wonder along these lines whether somebody will come to recognize the potential of microgrids as well, because they would go even further in that direction of keeping the distribution more local and offsetting the need to upgrade the bigger distribution system. What will it take to get the situation to be recognized in this way? Does it take an act of the legislature, or does the are the utilities going to figure it out for themselves, or does the MPSC have some leverage over calculating these numbers and these cost numbers accurately, and perhaps things like promoting microgrids?
So specifically about microgrids, we had another My Power Grid work group that looked at new technology and business models, and that report came out, I think, just a week ago. And it's a gigantic report, and there's a big section on microgrids, and there's a whole slew of like regulatory roadblocks that just, it's going to be very difficult to do microgrids without legislation, unless the utility voluntarily does it. So it's microgrids are, I know that there are states who are seriously looking at microgrids, like California. But I think there's a lot that has to be ironed out and figured out with the current regulatory model in Michigan before we can do too much with microgrids.
It does seem like it's in everybody's interest, though. The utility companies will save money on their investments. Certainly, the customers should save money, right?
So I don't know if we know, if we really know, if we went to like a microgrid model, if we would end up saving money in the long run? That's another question.
Well, you know, we're at 8:06, so I'm going to give the last question to Clayton. Go ahead, Clayton.
Okay, my question really is a comment. Because solar it fluctuates during the day time due to clouds and other reasons. You know, there are issues that the utilities do have, like with voltage fluctuation, which means that for them it's a cost. Regulators are moving up and down during the day to compensate for the fluctuation due to solar systems. You know, they have to put in capacitors. And so I'm not an apologist for the utilities, but as a power engineer, I just kind of want to, you know, levelize the conversation in that the utilities do have some costs. And I'm not saying I'm in solar, so don't get me wrong. So, but the utilities do have costs, and they do have technical issues that they're dealing with because of PV systems. My comment, that's it.
Okay, thank you, Clayton. And thank you, Julie, for, you know, we've got almost 8:10 now, so we're going to have to wrap this up. But this has been very helpful, very interesting. We're going to have you come back for sure sometime
This was
down the
fun.
road. Yeah, well, I'm glad you enjoyed it.
I did.
Yeah, because like John said, you know, that it's not like it's part of your job description, but we really do appreciate you taking the time to talk to us and answer questions. And I think we would all have to admit that the regulatory scheme is quite complicated, and the terminology can
Yes.
be challenging, but it's really helpful to have somebody like you come and kind of engage with us and try to help us figure out the weeds. So thanks everybody for coming tonight. And again, Julie, thank you very much for coming and talking to us. Take care, everybody.
Bye.